Hi, this is Gina Wagers, and I'm going to be presenting on the emerging challenges of cyberbullying within USD 475. To start with, our definition of cyberbullying is the use of any digital media, whether that's apps, texts, websites, to intimidate, upset, or harm someone through sending, posting, or sharing. Usually this behavior is repeated and intentional. The challenge with this, though, is that it's not static, especially with online behavior. It's multifaceted, it's increasingly diverse, and it takes many forms. So that is why we need to take a close look at our policies and see where we might need to make some updates. Thinking about our specific Board of Ed policies as far as bullying, we have a broad definition that includes any intentional gesture, whether it's written, verbal, electronic, or physical, that is sufficiently severe, persistent, or pervasive enough that it creates an intimidating, threatening, or abusive environment that is disruptive to the learning environment. And then we do have some specific examples bulleted there within our Board of Ed policies regarding what that might look like. We do have a brief description of how that bullying could also include cyberbullying, just being more specific in that it is the use of any electronic communication device through which those behaviors might take place. There are lots of different forms of cyberbullying. The one thing that our policy does not mention that we probably need to look at is roles in identifying who the bully, the target, the victims, and those who are in a role to stop the bullying are, because that is not something that is explicitly stated in there. We also don't have specific definitions of lots of these different types of bullying, but I think that's an important piece to include at our building level as we go through and we're looking at educating students and staff on these policies and how those look in the day-to-day as we are trying to identify these instances as they're happening. Thinking broadly again about some of the prevalence of cyberbullying and some of the statistics, there's been an increase in cyberbullying over the last 15 years. Nearly half of teens report experiencing at least one type of cyberbullying, and that was in 2002. 28% have experienced multiple types of cyberbullying, and 16% admit to cyberbullying others. So again, thinking about our population and our one-to-one access in our district, it's important that we address this through our prevention. However, prevention alone is not enough. It's not as effective as a solution. So we need to be looking at other things that we can do as well, because again, thinking about our building culture and climate, people who are perpetually victimized in the cyber world are also at risk for increased violent behaviors at school. This can also be reflected in the trends in our data as far as truancy and delinquency, and then also substance use. Another study found that 72.1% of adolescents have been involved in at least one type of cyberbullying situation. And then there's some specific information on breaking down again and helping to define the victim, the aggressor, versus those who are observers. It's pretty alarming that 62% of that population were observers. So again, thinking about the culture and climate in our building, we need to have resources available for students, even if they are not the one being victimized by this, that observing these kinds of behaviors are detrimental to the student population and staff as well. So thinking about those risk factors and what we can do to kind of help address some of those things through our policies. Main risk factors being high participation in online leisure activities like social networks and games. While we do have a lot of policy in our handbooks and even in the Board of Ed policies that address our use of school devices for educational use, I think it's important that we include parents as partners in addressing and talking about online participation outside of school as well, because many of our students do take their one-to-one devices home with them. And so we are not, I think we are responsible for partnering with them to kind of help support parents in implementing some structures in homes as well that can help with that, since we are providing access to those digital tools and their use is extended beyond the school day. So addressing cyberbullying, first and foremost, understanding how it's defined at the state and local level, whether it's harassment, intimidation, or bullying, being able to narrow down whether you're going to be addressing single or series of incidents. Again, thinking about if you're defining this as something that is reasonably perceived to disrupt or interfere with the orderly operation of the school, whether it's taking place on school property, any school-sponsored function, the bus, or off-school grounds. That's not something that's specifically addressed in our policy. We just have a definition of what bullying is, but we do not have any specific wording or verbiage that addresses how and when these incidents take place to address disciplinary action being taken through the school. So if we are providing these devices and they're going home with students and these incidents are happening on a school device but outside of school hours, how are we addressing those things? Knowing requirements for school policies, again, thinking about some of those procedural elements that we have to have as far as reporting and investigating once incidents are found, and then having clear levels of consequences and remedial actions that are going to take place following. Some of the policies here need to address cyberbullying more specifically as far as our focus on prevention and response. We do have a strong prevention piece to this, but I think we maybe are lacking in a little bit of defining some of how we respond to certain situations and how we define who is involved in those incidents. I think parental engagement is also, again, an effective strategy that we need to maybe work on developing some specific policies and wordings for, as the ones who control internet and technology use at home. When youth are involved in creating those rules, there is a trend that shows that cyberbullying tends to decrease. So understanding our community demographics, when our students are getting access to mobile devices, how many of them have access to internet, can help us kind of address some of those concerns that parents and stakeholders in the community might have about our one-to-one devices as well. Recommended responses may vary depending on whether the bullying occurred on a school-issued device and whether it happened during the school day. So again, I think we need to narrow in and focus and look carefully at how we're defining that, since we really don't have any specific parameters set in our Board of Ed policies for that. So that would be more of a building decision. To address cyberbullying, our district does have a technology department that vets a lot of our digital tools and online classroom curriculums. So it's the responsibility of our classroom teachers to kind of work with them if they're wanting to introduce a new tool or have students access something online through their classroom. At a building level, in addition to our one-to-one devices that we provide, knowing that a lot of our students are coming to school with cell phones, that's also an important piece of our building policy, because we do have a no cell phone policy in our building. We have anti-bullying month activities that kind of address some of those things as far as promoting prevention and awareness of cyberbullying. And then thinking of the classroom digital management tools, we have things like Securely that helps classroom staff to manage, block certain sites, or limit access to certain tools while students are online. So thinking about promoting student and adult well-being, how do we evaluate, communicate, and implement all these laws, policies, and regulations? First and foremost, being aware, being vigilant, monitoring, and then honestly just checking in and having conversations directly with students about behaviors that we see or observe. Implementing, again, some kind of prevention, but it needs to be focused more on ongoing. It can't just be our annual lesson on internet etiquette. I think we need to maybe focus on ongoing learning as a part of that. And I think maybe coupling that with some project-based learning to raise awareness of cyberbullying. That way it can also be something that contributes positively to the school culture and climate, because those things can be displayed in common areas of the school as well. And then utilizing local law enforcement to educate our youth on the legal consequences of cyberbullying is a good follow-up to the connection, again, outside of school, working with parents as partners as well, so that students understand when they leave school grounds with their school device that there are still very real guidelines for how they're using those tools. Evaluating our current policies, again, some of the challenges, cyberbullying can happen anywhere at any time. So thinking about our district and building expectations as far as promoting a positive and safe classroom culture, making sure that we are being vigilant when we're using devices. Another challenge is it can be hard to monitor all of our digital media use. Again, even though we have digital tools to where teachers can monitor and shut down or block certain things that students are accessing during the school day, partnering with parents to review those appropriate use policies and allow them to have opportunities to set guidelines and regulations as far as how that school device is being used at home if it's going home is an important piece of that as well. Another challenge, people can hide their identities and they really may not understand the implications of their actions outside of the school's policies. So utilizing counselors, student support professionals, and resource officers to support and having more restorative conversations once students do violate the policies. And then again, communicating with parents and guardians as far as our classroom use of devices so that they can follow through at home and maybe set some guidelines and expectations for what that looks like on their end as well. So then communicating with stakeholders is an important part of that. In addition to going over that annual acceptable use policy and agreement at enrollment, distributing the building handbook with clear discipline policies and levels for infractions, and then encouraging participation and engagement in the internet safety sessions that our district offers throughout the year in partnership with our local law enforcement so that parents are aware of trends and what's happening online and what to look for at home with their students. So then these are the specific steps laid out in our Board of Education policies handbook as far as how USD 475 focuses on bullying prevention. We do have a bullying prevention program based on KSDE's bullying prevention resource toolkit. We use the Kansas State Department of Education social, emotional, and character development standards and curriculums daily to address bullying and student mental health and support in the development of social emotional skills. We also implement and provides families with information and resources on bullying. We do have that partnership with local law enforcement where we have those sessions throughout the year for parents and families on internet safety. And then just again, providing students and families with the behavior expectations and building handbooks relating to specific incidents and then legal definitions of bullying. So ongoing efforts to continue supporting and improving these things is an important piece of that is data, tracking incidents of bullying, whether that's through referrals or reports so that we have some kind of data and information to inform future decisions, specifically on bullying incidents and social emotional data sources. We have SABRS and our social emotional screener that we use as well. So all of that combined can help give us a picture of the overall health and well-being of our students. Training, developing cultural awareness and understanding that certain demographic groups are disproportionately bullied. And we do have some annual training that staff are required to do every year as far as that, and then bullying prevention. Supporting beyond that, I think, is partnering the board with stakeholders outside of school to get that input to adopt and revise and implement any further policies that might need to be put in place to make what we have in our district a little bit more effective.